"Ma'am," the twins whispered, "we know what's wrong. We can fix it." Kimberly Caldwell looked down, ready to snap. Her company was collapsing. $3 billion disappearing by the second. 10 experts had failed. And now, 2 8-year-old girls with matching ginger curls were interrupting the worst moment of her life. Children, actual children, claiming that they could solve what top 10 experts in the industry couldn't. But she had nothing left to lose. When a female CEO gave 2 little girls 15 minutes to save her empire, she never imagined what would happen next. When a janitor walked in and saw his daughter surrounded by executives, he never imagined his buried past would be exposed. And when those twins reached for that keyboard, they never imagined that one brave moment would heal a father drowning in guilt and melt a woman who'd forgotten how to feel. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. 37 minutes earlier, Kimberly had been reviewing quarterly projections in her corner office, perfectly composed in her tailored suit, her long curly blonde hair swept into an immaculate low bun. Everything in her world was controlled, measured, predictable.
Then her CTO burst through the door, his face the color of an old newspaper. "We've been hacked. It's catastrophic." The operations center was chaos incarnate. Screens flashed angry red. 10 specialists hunched over keyboards, their fingers flying, sweat beading on foreheads despite the Arctic air conditioning. The virus, elegant, sophisticated, impossible, was draining client assets at a rate that made Kimberly's stomach lurch. "Status," she barked. "We can't isolate it," her lead engineer said, voice cracking. "It's rewriting itself. Every countermeasure we deploy, it adapts. We've never seen anything like this." Kimberly watched the numbers climb. $3 billion. $3 billion evaporating while the best minds in cybersecurity scrambled uselessly. "Find it," she barked. "Shut it down. Do something." But nothing worked. The virus moved like smoke, always 3 steps ahead, mocking their expertise. Everything she'd sacrificed, every relationship she'd ended, every friendship she'd let die, every night she'd chosen her office over a life. It was all crumbling in real time, and she was powerless to stop it. Martin Ashford wasn't supposed to be at Caldwell Technologies that Tuesday morning. He worked the night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., mopping floors in the quiet building while the rest of the world slept. But his colleague had called in sick, desperate, and Martin had said yes to covering the afternoon shift. The twins had been thrilling about it all morning. "Daddy, we can finally see where you work," Emma had said, bouncing on her toes. "Please, please, please," Ella had added, her ginger curls bobbing with excitement. It was their school break, and they'd been asking for weeks. Martin had run out of reasons to say no. At 8:30 a.m., he walked into the gleaming lobby with Emma and Ella flanking him, their matching backpacks making them look even more identical. The building during daylight hours felt foreign, filled with people in sharp suits, the energy of productivity humming through every corridor. So different from the empty, silent halls he knew.
He took them to the small janitor's break room on the second floor. Worn couch, scratch table, coffee maker that had seen better decades. "Stay here, okay?" Martin knelt at her level, making sure they understood. "I need to grab supplies from storage. I'll be right back. Don't wander off." "We promise, Daddy," Emma said solemnly. "Cross our hearts," Ella added. Martin kissed both their foreheads and headed down the hallway. The twins lasted exactly 5 minutes. "Do you hear that?" Emma whispered, tilting her head toward the door. Ella nodded. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, something electric and wrong in the air. "We should stay here," Ella said, but she was already standing. "Just a quick look," Emma agreed. They slipped out and followed the sound up the stairs. The commotion grew louder with each floor. Shouts, rapid keyboard clicks, tension so thick you could taste it. At the doorway of a massive operations center they stopped. Dozens of people crowded around enormous screens. Code, beautiful, complex, deadly, flowed across the displays. At the center stood a woman with blonde hair, her face pale, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. Emma and Ella understood immediately. The patterns, the panic, the desperation. This was a cyber attack, and it was winning. They exchanged that look, the one only twins could share. An entire conversation in a glance. Should we? What if they don't listen? What if Dad finds out? But Dad always said to help when we can. Emma remembered the night, months ago, when they'd been walking home and saw an elderly man struggling with groceries. Martin had stopped immediately. We help when we can, girls. Always. That's what makes us human. Decision made. They stepped into the room. Ella reached up and tugged the blonde woman's sleeve. Kimberly looked down, startled. Two little girls with matching ginger curls stood before her, completely out of place in her war room. Yes, Kimberly snapped, patience worn to nothing. Who are you? How did you get in here? We can help, Ella said quietly. What? The virus, Emma added, pointing at the screen. We can stop it. For a moment, Kimberly could only stare. These were children, no more than 7 or 8 years old, barging into a corporate catastrophe with backpacks and juice boxes. This isn't a game, Kimberly said, her voice dropping to dangerous levels. Where are your parents? How did you even get up here? Our dad works here, Emma said quickly. He's getting supplies. But please, ma'am, really we can help. That's a polymorphic worm with recursive encryption. It's brilliant, actually, but there's a pattern to— A what? A senior engineer spun around in his chair.
The virus is rewriting itself every 37 seconds, Ella explained, her 8-year-old voice matter of fact. That's why you can't isolate it. But it leaves trace signatures in the system memory. If you track the ghost footprints instead of chasing the active code, you can predict where it'll resurface and build a cage around it. The room went silent. Every head turned. 2 little girls were speaking like they'd written a textbook on advanced cybersecurity. Your father works here? Kimberly repeated slowly. Doing what? He's a janitor, Emma said simply. Night shift usually. He's covering for someone today. The CTO stepped forward, staring. How old are you two? 8, they said in perfect unison. Let 'em try, someone called from the back. We've got nothing to lose. We've already lost everything. Kimberly's instinct screamed to refuse. It was absurd, impossible. But she looked at the screens showing her company bleeding out, at her team of experts who'd exhausted every option, and made a split-second decision that would change her life. Fine. Give them a terminal. Emma and Ella moved like they'd been born to this. Their fingers danced across the keyboard in perfect synchronization, one typing, one monitoring, speaking in half sentences that completed each other's thoughts. The room held its collective breath. Code flowed across the screen. The twins worked with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural, their young faces illuminated by the blue glow, their concentration absolute. Kimberly watched, transfixed. Who were these children? 10 minutes passed. The hemorrhaging slowed. 12 minutes. The virus faltered. 15 minutes. It stopped. $3 billion sat frozen but recoverable. The attack neutralized. The impossible solved. The operations center erupted. Shocked exclamations, disbelief, engineers crowding around the terminal, examining the elegant solution the twins had coded. How did you— Emma! Ella! The voice from the doorway cut through everything. Male, strangled, terrified. Martin Ashford stood there in his janitor's uniform, a box of cleaning supplies forgotten in his hands, his face white as chalk. His daughters were surrounded by executives and engineers, their hands still on the keyboard, and his greatest fear was realized. What did you do? The twins spun around. Kimberly saw something that cracked her icy exterior. Genuine fear on their faces. Not fear of punishment. Fear of disappointing him. Fear of causing him more pain. Daddy, we're sorry, Emma whispered, tears starting. We were supposed to stay in the break room. We just wanted to help, Ella added, her voice breaking. We heard the noise and we came up and— Martin dropped the box. Cleaning supplies scattered across the expensive carpet as he crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled both girls into his arms. Kimberly expected anger, shouting. Instead, she watched this janitor, this man who cleaned her floors at night, hold his daughters as his shoulders shook. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you both. The twins started crying in earnest, relief flooding through them like breaking dams. "We thought you'd be angry." "Never." Martin pulled back to cup their faces, his thumbs wiping away tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I made you think you had to hide who you are. I'm sorry I let my pain steal your dreams." Kimberly watched, something unfamiliar and uncomfortable stirring in her chest. When was the last time anyone had looked at her with that much pure love? The CTO stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but your daughters just saved this company. They're the most talented—" "Wait," one of the senior engineers interrupted, staring at Martin with widening eyes. "You're Martin Ashford? You're Martin Ashford? You designed the Fortress Protocol. You worked at Quantum Defense Systems. You were a legend in cybersecurity. What are you—" "Not now," Martin said quietly but firmly. He stood, keeping the twins close. "But sir, your daughters—" "Thank you for letting them help." Martin's voice was polite, but closed off, his body language screaming that this conversation was over. "Come on, girls."
"Wait!" Kimberly's voice cut through the murmurs rippling through the operations center. She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the floor. "Please." Martin paused, looking at her warily. "Your daughters just saved my company," Kimberly said, her voice softer than anyone in that room had ever heard it. "They saved everything I've built. Please let me thank them properly. Dinner, tomorrow night, my treat." "That's not necessary," Martin said, already shaking his head. "I insist." Kimberly looked at Emma and Ella, saw their hopeful expressions. "They deserve to be celebrated for what they did today. Please." "Miss Caldwell?" "Kimberly," she corrected. "And I won't take no for an answer. These two are extraordinary, and the least I can do is buy them pizza." Martin hesitated, torn between his instinct to protect his privacy and the twins' eager faces. "Please, Daddy," whispered Emma. "It's just dinner," Ella added. Martin looked at his daughters, then at Kimberly, and felt something shift in his chest. This woman, the CEO who'd been barking orders minutes ago, was looking at his girls with genuine warmth. "All right," he said finally, "dinner." Kimberly showed up to the restaurant the next evening expecting an awkward obligation meal. What she found instead surprised her more than any data breach ever could. She found herself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in years, as Emma told an elaborate story about a squirrel they'd named Algorithm who'd figured out how to break into their bird feeder. "So we had to engineer a solution," Ella added, her hands gesturing wildly. "We created a pulley system with counterweights so only birds light enough could land on the feeder." "Did it work?" Kimberly asked, genuinely curious. "For 3 days," Emma said with a grin. "Then Algorithm figured out the pulley system and broke it anyway. We have to respect the hustle." Kimberly laughed again, the sound foreign in her own ears. Martin was quiet, watching his daughters with that soft expression that made Kimberly's chest tighten. When was the last time someone had looked at anything with that much pure love? "What made you start your company?" Emma asked, tilting her head. "I wanted to prove I could," Kimberly said, then paused. Why was she being honest? "I wanted to prove that I was worth something." "You're worth lots of things," Ella said matter-of-factly, "like at least 12 things, maybe even 15. Kimberly felt something crack in her chest. 15 things? That's pretty generous. "We could make a list if you want," Emma offered seriously. After the twins got distracted by their coloring menus, Kimberly turned to Martin. She'd been curious since yesterday. No, if she was honest, she'd been consumed by curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. Martin looked up from his water glass, his expression guarded but not unfriendly. "Depends on the question." "Why is one of the most brilliant cybersecurity architects in the industry working as a night janitor?" Martin was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. Kimberly almost apologized, almost took it back, but then he spoke. "Because I couldn't do it anymore.
The work that I loved, the work that defined me. I couldn't do it without remembering what it cost me. What did it cost you? Martin looked at his daughters, making sure they were still absorbed in their coloring. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. My wife, Grace, 12 months ago.
Kimberly's breath caught. I was working late, Thursday evening, critical security update. Martin's hands tightened around his glass. The twins were with me at the office. They often were. They loved being there, surrounded by all the technology. He paused, and Kimberly waited, sensing he needed to tell this at his own pace. Grace called around 7, said she'd come pick us up, take us to dinner. The twins loved this Italian place downtown. I told her to give me another hour. Martin's voice cracked slightly. She said, I'll leave now. See you soon, love. Kimberly's heart clenched. She never made it. A drunk driver ran an intersection at twice the speed limit, hit her car broadside. Police said she died instantly. Like that was supposed to make it easier. Martin, Kimberly breathed, her hand moving unconsciously across the table toward his. If I'd left work on time, if I'd taken the girls home earlier, if I just said no to one more project, one more late night, his voice broke. Grace wouldn't have been on that road. She'd still be alive, still be here, still be their mother. It wasn't your fault, Kimberly said softly. Wasn't it? Martin looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. I chose work over family. I chose one more hour over going home, and she died because of that choice. You chose to finish something important. That's not the same as choosing work over family. And a drunk driver chose to get behind the wheel. That's not on you. Martin shook his head. Logically, I know that, but guilt doesn't care about logic. It eats at you anyway, every single day.
So you quit. 3 weeks after the funeral, cashed everything out, set up trust funds for the girls, and took the first job I could find that had nothing to do with technology. I thought if I ran far enough from the work that cost me Grace, I could escape the guilt. Did it work? No. Martin's laugh was bitter. It just made me hollow, like I was living without purpose, drowning in guilt every single day. But at least I had time with Emma and Ella. At least I could be there for them the way I wasn't there for Grace. Kimberly was quiet for a moment, processing. What you didn't know was that the twins were still coding. Martin's expression softened slightly. In secret, late at night, they'd hidden a laptop under Emma's bed. They protected me from their passion because they didn't want to hurt me more than I was already hurting. They love you very much. They're my reason for breathing, Martin said simply. They're why I get up every morning, even when the guilt tells me I don't deserve to. Kimberly looked at this man, this brilliant, broken, devoted man, and felt something shift in her chest. Something dangerous and unfamiliar and absolutely terrifying. You know what I think? She said quietly. What? I think she'd want you to live. Really live, not just exist. To let Emma and Ella be who they're meant to be. To stop punishing yourself for being human. Martin stared at her, his eyes suddenly bright. I think she'd want you to honor her memory by embracing life, not running from it. I don't know if I can, Martin whispered. I think you're braver than you realize. Kimberly's hand finally covered his across the table. They sat like that for a moment, connected across the table, two broken people beginning to see possibility in each other. Emma looked up from her coloring. Daddy's smiling again. Ella nodded sagely. Miss Kimberly makes him smile. Martin and Kimberly pulled their hands back, both suddenly self-conscious. But they were smiling.
That dinner changed everything. More dinners followed, weekend outings that Kimberly found herself looking forward to with an eagerness that felt almost teenage. The twins dragged her to museums, where they asked impossible questions about ancient civilizations and whether the Egyptians had understood basic coding principles. Martin cooked dinner at their modest apartment one evening, and Kimberly discovered he was better than any restaurant chef. Watching him move around the small kitchen, explaining techniques to the twins as they helped, she felt envious of something she'd never experienced. This warmth, this belonging, this family. "You're staring," Martin said, not looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. "I'm observing," Kimberly corrected, but she smiled. She started showing up at the twins' school events, something she'd never imagined herself doing. Watched Emma's science presentation on quantum computing with pride swelling in her chest. Cheered too loudly when Ella won the spelling bee. One evening, sitting on their apartment's small balcony while the twins did homework inside, Kimberly made an offer. "I'd like you to come work for me," she said. "Head of cybersecurity at Caldwell Technologies." Martin's eyes widened. "Kimberly, we need someone brilliant, someone who understands how systems can be vulnerable, someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and wants to protect others from that pain. I don't know if I can... I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm asking you to think about it." She paused. "And I'd like to sponsor a special program for gifted young coders. Emma and Ella would be perfect for it." Martin looked at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because watching you hold your daughters in that operations center was the first time in 10 years I felt something real." Kimberly's voice was quiet. "Because you reminded me that there are things more important than profit margins. Because I think..." She trailed off, uncertain. "Because you think..." "What?" "Because I think you're brave, and I'd like to learn how to be brave too."
The transformation happened slowly, like ice melting in spring, gradual, inevitable, beautiful. Kimberly started leaving work at reasonable hours. Her assistant nearly fainted the first time she said, "That can wait until tomorrow." She attended the twins' school play, sitting next to Martin in the uncomfortable auditorium chairs, her heart swelling as Emma and Ella performed a comedic skit they'd written about two robots learning to feel emotions. Martin took a consulting project with Caldwell Technologies, just one, small and manageable. His hands shook the first time he touched a keyboard for work, but Kimberly was patient. She never pushed, just sat nearby, answering questions when he asked, giving him space when he needed it. The twins flourished, their genius recognized and nurtured. No more hiding. They started attending the gifted program Kimberly had created, coming home every day with excited stories about their projects. "Daddy, did you know you can use machine learning to predict weather patterns?" Ella asked one evening. "And we're building a program to help identify food allergies before they become dangerous," Emma added. Martin watched his daughters, animated and brilliant and free, and felt something he hadn't in 12 months: peace. One evening, Kimberly attempted to help Martin cook. It was a disaster of epic proportions. "How did you set water on fire?" Martin asked, half laughing, half horrified. "I have no idea." Kimberly stared at the smoking pot. "I just followed your instructions. I said simmer, not summon the flames of destruction." Emma and Ella dissolved into giggles, watching from the doorway as their father and Kimberly scrambled to contain the kitchen catastrophe.
Later, after they'd ordered pizza and were sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by the twins' artwork, Martin's hand brushed Kimberly's. Neither pulled away. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing us. For seeing me." Kimberly's throat tightened. "Thank you for teaching me how to live." Emma and Ella exchanged knowing glances from across the room. Their father was smiling again, really smiling, and this woman with blonde hair was looking at him like he hung the moon. It wasn't traumatic, wasn't a lightning bolt or a grand gesture, just two people who'd been broken in different ways, slowly healing each other with patience and presence and the courage to try again. One evening, Martin showed Kimberly his first office at Quantum Defense Systems through old photos on his phone. That was before everything changed. "Nothing changed for the worse," Kimberly said softly. "It transformed. You transformed. And maybe that's not the tragedy you think it is." Martin looked at her, this woman who'd been ice and ambition, and now warmth and laughter and home. I think I'm falling in love with you. Kimberly's breath caught. I think I fell weeks ago and was too scared to say it. Their first kiss tasted like hope and second chances and the promise of better tomorrows. 2 years after the data breach, Martin brought Kimberly back to the operations center. Emma and Ella were hiding nearby, practically vibrating with excitement over their role in the plan. The room looked different now, less sterile, more lived in. Martin's team, his team now since he'd accepted the position as head of cybersecurity, had personalized their spaces, photos, plants, life.
This is where everything changed, Martin said, holding Kimberly's hand. Where 2 8-year-old girls showed me that running from my past wasn't honoring Grace's memory. Living was. Kimberly felt tears building. Martin! This is where I watched the coldest person I'd ever met reveal the warmest heart I'd ever known. He smiled, soft and certain. This is where my life began again. He knelt, pulling out a small velvet box. Kimberly's hand flew to her mouth. Kimberly Caldwell, you taught me that broken things can become beautiful. That endings can be beginnings. That love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. His voice shook slightly. Will you marry me? Yes! Emma and Ella burst from their hiding spot, unable to contain themselves any longer. Say yes! Say yes! Say yes! Kimberly was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Martin slipped the ring on her finger as the twins crashed into both of them, a tangle of arms and tears and joy. The 4 of them stood there in the operations center, where it all began, holding each other. A family built from broken pieces and brave choices. 6 months later, Kimberly stood in her office, the same office where her CTO burst in with news of catastrophic failure, and looked at the photo on her desk. All 4 of them at the beach, windswept and genuinely happy. Martin with his arms around Kimberly, Emma and Ella building an elaborate sandcastle with structural engineering principles.
Her company had recovered, thrived even, but that wasn't what made her smile every morning. What made her smile was the sound of Martin's key in their front door at the end of the day, the twins' excited voices explaining their latest coding project, the family dinners where everyone helped cook and nobody set anything on fire anymore. The way Martin looked at her like she was his whole world. The way the twins called her Kimberly, but the word sounded like family. Martin had stopped running from his pain and started living with it. Grace's memory wasn't a wound anymore. It was a foundation, something beautiful they'd built their new life upon. Emma and Ella were thriving in the gifted program, already being courted by universities despite being only 10. But more importantly, they were happy, whole, free to be brilliant without hiding. And Kimberly, the woman who'd built an empire on ice, had learned that the warmest thing in the world wasn't profit margins or quarterly reports. It was coming home to 3 people who loved her not for what she'd accomplished, but for who she was. Sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected places, from janitors who were once legends, from children who see possibilities where adults see impossibilities, from hearts brave enough to risk feeling again.
In the end, it wasn't the data breach that changed everything. It was 2 8-year-old girls who saw someone drowning and refused to look away, who reminded a broken man that life was still worth living, who showed a cold-hearted CEO that the best algorithms couldn't calculate the value of love. Martin had never imagined that covering a colleague's shift would lead to the best decision of his life. Kimberly never knew that her company's greatest catastrophe would introduce her to her greatest love. Emma and Ella never planned to save anyone that day. They just wanted to help. But that's how the best things in life happen, when we're brave enough to help, brave enough to feel, brave enough
to try again. Because you never know who's waiting on the other side of your fear. You never know what beautiful things can grow from broken pieces. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you kindness still matters. Compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lift Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.